Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Art Basel, Miami Beach Conversations. This is a pretty exciting talk. It's called VR, Celebrity and Innovation. I'm very excited for Elvia Wilk to be moderating this talk. Elvia is a writer and an editor based in New York. Please join us in welcoming all of our speakers. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Mary and Annalie, for organizing. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm also excited to be here with these three. Jacolby Satterwhite is an artist based in New York. Earlier this year at Art Basel in Basel, he had an installation using VR at his Statements exhibition with Moran Gallery, where it was called Domestica, and there were pieces, elements from the VR universe also in the gallery booth space. So it was a complex interaction between the virtual and the physical, the helmet on and the helmet off. So I'd like to talk a lot about that, I think. Masha Faurschou is a partner at Khora Contemporary, which is a VR production company created to help artists use VR who may have never gotten the chance before, so to kind of initiate that contact, start a conversation, and then produce works. They've made work with artists, lots of artists, including Yu Hong, Paul McCarthy, and Tony Orsler. And they have a production and technical team in Copenhagen that supports those endeavors. Francois Quentin is the director of Lafayette Anticipations, which opened very recently in Paris in March. Lafayette Anticipations is described as a laboratory and as a production catalyst. So that means it's a support structure for artists from start to finish, building new commissions, technically complicated or otherwise. And right now on view is an exhibition by Simon Fujiwara called Revolution, which includes one piece called Empathy, which is an immersive simulated experience. I don't think technically VR, but confronting a lot of the same challenges and opportunities. So the panel is going to focus not just on VR as a medium, why artists might use it, or the content of specific works, but really this processual aspect of the kind of technical production that goes into this. VR is not a solo sport yet. It probably won't ever be. The building of it, the using of it is very much a solo sport. But it, in that sense, demands a really wide range of actors to produce it, and the production needs to be, I guess the dissemination and the exhibition have to be thought of right from the beginning. So it's a really integrated, can be very long-term production experience also. So I think it demands questions about how institutions can change and work as enablers, and also as collaborators and partners with artists. I think it demands questioning the nature of commissions, so what a commission is, and where does it start and where does it stop. And I think it also demands continuous reevaluation of authorship, access, how artists work with people from other fields, how people access work that is technologically dependent, so forth. And I think there are also a lot of ethical questions that we'll get into eventually regarding how things get made. So I want to start with a really basic question, which is why VR? It's really easy to assume that because it's there, it should be used. I think for tech evangelists, it's very easy to integrate virtual reality into this progress narrative of kind of utopian relationships with technology. So I'm equally or more interested in artwork that uses the technology to question and challenge those progress narratives. And I think, I'd like to ask Jacolby, why VR?
Because it's necessary. Well, not to jump in so quickly, but I kind of started working in digital media, more advanced digital media, about 10 years ago when I applied to this residency called Harvest Works in New York. Harvest Works actually was one of the first technology residencies in period. It started in the late 70s, and they also kind of help inaugurate the cassette tape as a new technology. And so when I got into the residency, I was studying softwares that were precursors to Unity, which is DIY, like, I guess, consumer software that allows a regular consumer to make interactive, moving, whatever. So I realized I didn't want to do that, and I ended up learning Maya, Autodesk Maya, and After Effects more. And I modeled over 4 terabytes of objects from an archive of drawings I've been using for most of my practice. And eventually I realized as technology began to advance and my computer got better and I could render 4K films, and 360 cameras were being implemented into Maya, I realized making a virtual reality film is kind of the most obvious thing for me to do. Because one thing, my biggest frustration with making film is in 3D animated film is that I have like 360 POV, and I have to delegate the camera for the viewer to see it in the way that I want them to see it. But I'm also animating on all axes, and those POVs are being sacrificed in order for me to economize and make a linear film. And so I was really excited by the prospect of having simultaneous narratives happening on all axes and really pushing what narrative can be if you look at it from all those sides. Primarily what really inspired me was this film Rashomon. It's a Japanese film that has 6 different narratives that, like, I guess you don't know which one's the lie. And that's what modernism is trying to find the truth through observation. Cubism was about different perspectives. So simultaneous perspective is kind of like, it was kind of like my modernist contribution or something like that, So
It seems like, in that sense, a very obvious outgrowth of your practice and not sort of an arbitrary thing at all. But Masha, you were mentioning that you mentioned to me that a lot of the artists you approach hadn't maybe thought of it as a possibility until it was offered and then totally jumped at the opportunity. How does that process of initiation work?
Yeah, that's the part that actually I'm focusing on. Khora Contemporary as a company is formed of the 2 groups. One group is the tech guys who do the developing and know the latest language in virtual reality. And then there's me, my husband, and one more partner who come from the art world, and we are the ones who are interested in initiating artists, let's put it this way, or inviting artists to do the virtual reality projects. And so far, I don't think we are at the point where we have to talk them into it. Right now, we are at the point where we just come and mention the word to the artist, and they usually go, hell yes, I've been thinking about it. I have an idea that I've been thinking about, but I would not start realizing it because I just don't know where to start. So that's where we thought would be a good idea to start this project.
Could you talk about the Simon Fujiwara exhibit a bit and the actual procedural development of that piece and how it differs from VR technically?
Well, it's, I mean, the piece itself is not a VR technology, of course. It's more like flight simulator. It's a work that Simon has created for this show, and we could produce with Esther Schipper, actually, and that was also shown there. It's a flight simulator, so you're on a chair, and you see just, images that are projected, and the chair is moving, like you find in parks, plush parks, and so things are moving. So it's like an overall experience. And I remember Simon was actually in a situation at some point to choose whether it would be that kind of technology or a VR technology, and he was more into this thing because the situation of the viewer as being someone just locked, on a chair, looking at something was something that he was really interested in, because it's immersive, but it's also very passive. As an experience. So you're looking at images, and those images are actually images that you can find, on web, that are supposed to witness about reality. Like you would see a migrant, on a boat, like say, but you would also see a girl in her bedroom just showing her TVs. You would see things that are, you could easily find over internet, And then you have this kind of experience, which I think is really interesting because it is like a real supplement of reality, because you are moving at the same time as the image is moving. So you are the eye of the camera, and you. I mean, at some point you just go out of the water. You have some water, wind. So you're actually experiencing it. But the supplement of reality actually.
So it's an immersive.
It's totally
reality,
immersive.
you would say.
It's totally immersive. But at the same time, you don't. And that's why it's called empathy. It's also because you have a hard time to be on empathy with what you see. All those images go so fast that you just go out of the box. That it's kind of a you've lived an experience, which is something you had no control on. And for him, it's of course a way to confront and have the public experiencing images in such a way that not as victims, but as create a situation where the public is in position to have a critical point of view about what he just has seen and how it kind of recomposes itself in the memory.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this idea of active versus passive viewership in immersive experiences, because there are so many ways to approach that. On the one hand, there's a lot of criticism for VR for being for the potential for it to be such a manipulative medium, because when you're in this reality, the simulation can be so convincing that if you're, say, exposed to violent imagery, people report having real post-traumatic stress symptoms from experiencing something so real seeming. And it doesn't take much hijacking of your senses for your nervous system to be very tricked. So there's this idea that immersion comes with a responsibility on the part of the artist or the creator to put you in a safe space, or at least to consider the ethical implications of that experience. And I would be very curious to know how the three of you think about that kind of like passive immersion versus other kinds of immersive experiences, say an immersive environment where you can really act and react to I guess, stimuli, which is also possible in VR. There are also ways that you could act and react, but that's a different sort of thing.
I think this issue of how powerful virtual reality is on the viewer, I think we've already been through it with the cinema, for instance, when it was introduced. I still remember this image of people looking at the screen and the train coming, and they all go.
Right, the
like
Lumiere myth, whether or not that's true, yeah.
Yeah, it is true. It was totally believable. I remember my own childhood where, I was first, because for a while we had no TV. And then I was introduced to the TV, and I remember I was totally shocked and overwhelmed. And now it just, it doesn't even bother me. So I think it's the same with virtual reality, where we will kind of grow immune to it, and the perception, because right now, of course, everybody admits that what you feel is when you enter the space, you are completely there. You totally believe it, even though you're telling yourself this is not true, this is not happening. You can't help but believe that this is happening. And for instance, there is a simulation where you can get to the top of the bridge, and then you jump off the bridge, or if you make a step, you have a feeling that you're then falling off that bridge down in between the skyscrapers. And it's like, I don't know how many times I have to tell myself, but I totally believe every time that I'm falling. So I'm just doing this move with my body. And yeah.
I also had this experience.
But I think the ethical part of it is, it doesn't apply exclusively to virtual reality, because it's like this with all the art. What message do you convey, and how do you approach it, and what responsibility you take for it? So
exactly, I think it highlights those questions that are already always evident and persistent, because it is a new. So it forces you to look at those, I guess, implicit questions that are always there.
Yeah, I mean, I think about even in the 70s when The Exorcist came out, when we think about religious imagery in cinema and people have nightmares about demons. And it's more about, like, I think it's just like, it's just a novelty, and people will get used to it. People will evolve into it, just like they did with, moving like this cinema or 2D video games. I just think when people aren't used to a new technology, that there's this resistance. I mean, I played video games since I was 2 years old, so like I'm kind of programmed to kind of see space in an axial perspective. I don't understand where the nausea comes from.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, I think it's just an adaptive thing. Yeah.
But there is something which is important to say is that with VR, the public becomes an involunteer performer. Like if you have, I mean, for instance, we have in our collection a piece by Daniel Stigman-Mangrané, which is a fantastic VR piece called Phantom, where you have like the helmet, the Oculus Rift thing, and then you stand up, which is fairly rare actually, and so you're in a space and you can walk around, and you are in the middle of a scanning of a forest in the Amazonian forest. So you see all the trees, leaves, everything, and everything is still like with little dots. So it's not a photo kind of rendering. It's more like it's very digital. It's very like every dot is actually marking like a point. So it's almost mathematical. But you are in a space which is like the forest, which this kind of part of the forest has been scanned for like a square kilometer, so it's a huge thing. Well, anyway, so the thing is, for this piece, for instance, it's very hard to have images of the piece because the only image you can have is actually someone just walking around like this with the helmet, and that's it. So most of the time, of course, the experience has something to do with the fact that the viewer becomes, an inventory performer. And I just wanted to mention also this VR piece by a young French artist called Julien Creuset, which has been shown lately at the Rencontre d'Arles in France, in south of France, in which Julien has created this piece, which is more like I would say, a poem in a way. It's called Maïs Marlborough, because it's a piece about Barbès Rochechouart, which is this area in Paris where people are saying hot corn and selling also Marlboro, cigarettes. And it's kind of an ode kind of poem about this kind of mixed, urban area of Paris. And then you're seated in a chair, you have the helmet, and you see the whole kind of dome with like this kind of song, images appearing, everything. But the chair you're sitting is actually the sculpture. And it goes, and you can turn around, on the thing. So you become the performer of a sculpture that is visible from the outside. And you see the piece from the inside. And somehow there's kind of a nice, relationship between the outside and the inside. But this is, of course, one thing about VR is that, unlike, cinema, for the train on arrivée à la gare de la Ciotat was a film, but everybody was like under their seats. Like the fear was shared by the whole, collectivity of people inside the room. Where with VR, you of course, you have this kind of immediate relationship between the inside and the outside of the artwork.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting area for artists to explore, and that also answers the question of why VR. It simply is because it just gives so much more. So it opens up many more layers of possibilities to the artistic practice, where suddenly you have no limit in gravitation, or you will not hurt yourself if you fall, or a lot of things. And this is actually the one of the areas where the artist can play with combining the outside world with the inner perception, so that the person who is experiencing the VR can also be himself the performer who is being observed by other audience. And there's just so many possible approaches to what you can do, and that is what is fascinating. And I think it's not about particular artists becoming specifically VR artists. I think it's just natural artistic curiosity to try this medium and explore this particular concept that they have, which is possible with this technology.
Yeah, I think when you say that, it makes me think that artists also are always thinking about context, maybe in the way that video game designers wouldn't be. The assumption might be that you're in your living room on the sofa, whereas there's a kind of classic VR saying that the VR experience starts before you put the headset on and it ends after you take the headset off. You're in a space when you are putting a headset on. And the context of that space, if you're in an art gallery being watched by a bunch of people and trying to hold your purse and wandering around, is very different than if you're sitting in a chair that is a sculpture that is part of the artwork. Which is considering your physical body as you're acting out this simulated reality. And I was thinking about that a lot when I saw your booth at Basel earlier this year, Jacolby, because I felt like when I took off the headset, I was in a different space than when I had put it on, because the artworks in the space, the tangible stuff, had taken on a new meaning according to what I had just seen.
Yeah. Well, for me, that particular piece is a precursor to what I think is, I kind of want to start a conversation of how to bring the objecthood back to music in a streaming media world, how music is so ephemeral, and Spotify and iTunes makes it really just this kind of throwaway thing. There's we have access to millions of songs. And so I made this album, a concept album, and the whole purpose of it was that after I finished the films, I would translate the films into virtual reality 360 films that are interactive. And the great thing about the medium the great thing about working in Unity for VR is that there is an audio component for where, if I look up, left, right, and behind, it can trigger other noises. So for a techno musician, being able to democratize synths and instruments based on your POV and the image associated with it, giving a synesthesia to the video and the sound, so it merges music, video, and and moving image in a way that is less arbitrary than the music video format. And so I thought, wow, this is a really great medium to introduce a different kind of level of re-entry to the listening and viewing experience. Because in order to hear a musical composition, if you made a VR album, if you made a VR album, you have to, listen to the album 5 times to understand what would happen if the chord progression or the chord change happens when you look on the northwest axis.
Because it's reactive to your behavior.
Yeah. And it could be a much more compelling sonic experience if you just, took down this path, with...
Right, it gives you a sense of agency and choice as well.
Choice and and really exploring the textures and appreciating, having a synesthesia between, having a tactility around the sound and the viewing experience.
Right.
So I feel like it's more VR. Why VR? Because it allows you to pay attention more. It allows you to appreciate your body. We can't smell with VR, but maybe I can. Maybe if I get a essential oil kit. So anyway.
Smell-o-vision. Do you remember Smell-o-vision?
Yeah. I'll prank you all. Something.
Okay, we stop here. That can be taken in questions and answers.
I'm done with that.
Oh, yeah, that's what it's gonna do.
Somebody... Were you gonna? It seemed like you wanted to add something to this when he was talking about the synesthesia aspect of it, or this aspect of, I guess, bringing in multiple dimensions and also agency and choice. Did you want to say something? It looked like you did. You raised.
Yeah, I wanted. It was just interesting because I was thinking, would this kind of experience be something that you could do outside of VR? Yeah. Or is this exclusive to this medium?
No,
would you consider making an artwork with other means?
Making an art with other...
Yeah, by using the same mechanism.
Oh, I use the same variables in 6 different ways. Every single project I do can be composite it into another format and say the exact same thing. I kind of like the universality approach. But what I will say is that I'm not a fan of the headset, and I'm more so interested in the progress of dealing with, opacity in the eyeglass frame for VR. When I was working with the New Museum on their virtual reality exhibition, and Lauren Cornell partnered with, I forgot the name of the organization, but I really enjoy experiencing my film on an iPhone 10 or iPhone 7, or an iPad, because you download this app off of Apple, and you're able to move the object around, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing as
This
your
was
peer.
like the new museum commission project
Yeah.
where they had you could download an app
Yeah,
and download
they have an
these-
app, actually.
Yeah, and you can also add Google Cardboard to it.
Yeah. Well, the worst part about that is dealing with Apple and iTunes, just like Apple, and Apple and iTunes killing Tumblr porn. I can't. They're just. So anyway, they sent me like 20,000 time codes of every nipple, every butt crack, everything, like every broken toenail. They were like, "This is obscene." And so I literally felt like I was plucking my own nose out, like to get this thing acceptable. I made a 18-minute VR film become 4 minutes because there was that many nipples in
And
it.
I have to say, this is
You know.
exactly why Khora Contemporary was created. So artists like you do not have to suffer
Oh my
through this
God.
stuff.
I was so
That's why we have a
embarrassed.
team of people who know what they're doing, they're dealing with it every day, and you can just focus on the creativity part.
Thank God for you.
Yeah.
I literally feel like that was a Ashton Kutcher prank on me, like having to push that project into the world because I had to,
But that's so outrageous because VR is not mainly used for art. It's mainly used for gaming, sports, and porn, and that's where the money is.
Yeah, but like if you're gonna.
Overwhelmingly. So you think that the visual...
Entertainment, a lot of amusement parks are using that, medicine, education, banks, would you believe it? They're even making virtual reality meeting rooms. So it's spreading much faster than we think, and it's coming. And
It's
there's
definitely
no,
spreading quickly,
yeah.
but I think something like 60% of the funding is from video gaming and sports. Like just to say the percentage of where the investment is I guess I highlight this because I think that it's impossible then to use the medium without somehow responding to the fact that the visual vocabulary is like the I guess visual vocabulary that most of us share when we think of VR is related in some sense to gaming probably.
have you seen our works? I mean, that's true that you see a lot of artists who start with virtual reality and it looks like they're just so fascinated by the technology and the opportunities that they start creating this kind of virtual labyrinths where you go through spaces and look at the wonderful creatures and the worlds that you can create. But approaching it with a real artistic concept is the very interesting thing. And when you kind of pass through that point of initial fascination with technology and just get to the point of the message of your artwork, that's when it becomes...
Certainly, I mean,
And then-
regardless of what artists end up doing with it, I do think when most people imagine putting on a headset, though, that they're sort of reacting to the cultural imaginary of gaming, no? Or do you think that's changing?
Well, there's something about the aesthetic of gaming is also, I mean, it's part of our imagery anyway, and the thing is, I just wanted to mention this. I did a show like in 2002, so that was a long time ago, about games and video games, and it was a show, interesting show about video games and cities and the representation of cities through video games. For that, it was only artists. I remember the work of Palle Thorsson, for instance, who's a Swedish artist, and Tobias Bernstrup. And Tobias Bernstrup did this very interesting work on Potsdamer Platz, where he reconstructed Potsdamer Platz entirely 3D. And you would actually walk around Potsdamer Platz. And it was 2001, 2002. So Potsdamer Platz was like brand new. I mean, it was just like almost just finished, And so he was doing this video game at the same time as Potsdamer Platz was built. He was building his own game at the same time. So you would just like walk around. And I remember that not so long after that show, I went to Berlin and I had this kind of night walk through Potsdamer Platz, and I was just right into the game. And there's something about this piece particularly which was of interest for me, because the fact that this virtuality becomes real, back. I would say, like if you drive a Beetle car, you don't even drive a car. You drive the idea of another car, which was the one before. So this kind of virtuality becomes totally, solid now in the world. So I think what artists have been pointing out with this relationship with video games is this particular relationship between reality and virtuality.
I kind of want to add too. It's funny how you're like, is it for gaming or is it for art? But when I first bought a PlayStation, and well, I didn't buy it, my daddy bought it, and I was like, oh my God, it was 1995 or something like that, and it came with this demo full of conceptual digital, well, they were kind of conceptual art projects in the demo to show you the capacity of this 32-bit machine, because it was the first time 32-bit gaming came into, after, I think, Dreamcast or something. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that when 32-bit gaming happened, that's when experimental interactive pieces started to be developed by game developers. Like Shenmue was this game on the Dreamcast that actually is a precursor to something I find more advanced in virtual reality. It was the first game that was time-based. You played a character who lived in the real world, and you really didn't get to start with like the action sequences until 70 hours in the game. But you had to have this character go grocery shopping. You had to make this character sleep. The machine was running. When you turned off the Dreamcast, the game was still running. Like the character's life the sun was going up and down. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that game developers think formally in a similar way that I think a lot of virtual reality and new media artists, like a Khora Archangel or myself or people who I think who are prominent in the art world. But I don't think there is a difference. Once something is moving, it's gaming. Once your body can stimulate a call and response between a moving image that's digital, I just call that a game. It's all the same.
Right?
So
I mean,
it's
to
no
me,
different.
gaming, there's no stigma in calling something a game.
Yeah, but it's like, even when Mark Essen was in the New Museum with those games, they were like, oh, because they look like, they tried to make them like Rothko paintings, like, oh, it's like a Rothko, like the way it was installed,
Right.
And it's like this excuse.
Or like a validation.
A validation, or like finding a way to composite onto some kind of trope that's in art history in order to make you consider it to be an art and a game.
Do you find that challenging, both of you, to justify the presence of this kind of new media in art spaces? Is there some kind of pushback? Or is that sort of outdated now?
I think once people, from our experience, once people have tried it and saw it, there is no denial that they understand that this is just an extension to the practice of the artist. So I think where we find still resistance is the market, because that's the part where, let's say, private collectors or institutions think, okay, how do we approach this? How, if I buy this work, what do I do with it? And then there come a lot of issues that follow. For instance, how am I protected from people not copying it, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think we've been through it also with the video art, and that has been overcome. So we really see that coming soon we really feel that now there's kind of coming bigger and bigger demand, especially from the institutions, particularly with us. We've been, just in the last half year, contacted by several museums around the world who want to make a permanent virtual reality room where they will be showing, whatever works they select. So it will be like their curatorial project. And the advantage of that is that, I would suggest any institution does that, because you don't have to transport the work, you don't have to store the work, you don't have to insure the piece, you don't have all that headache that comes with the usual exhibiting activity. So why not? Why not have that, and why not show that?
No, indeed, you're absolutely right. But the thing is, there are, as you said, economical questions that are linked to that, and that might, change in the future. But like this piece I was mentioning by Daniel Simon, each time we show it, it's about like 5,000 to 7,000 euro just to put it up, just like the whole technical, the situation. So it's kind of it's always kind of difficult. And the other thing is also in terms of institution you were mentioning, which I think is a very interesting thing, is that whether like big institutions, big museums can actually acquire important work of virtual reality, is also the fact that the technique is changing so quickly that most of them they have to find ways to store that in such a way that there's this beautiful book by co-written by John Ippolito, who's a teacher at University of Maine, and he's the one who was also curator of this show called Virtual Reality Emerging Medium in '93. So I happened to see that show because I was an intern at the Guggenheim at the time in '93, and it was a great exhibition because Ginny Holzer did a piece, and there was this.
It was a historic exhibition.
It was a very important show, and John was curator of that show, and he wrote also this book called Recollection. It's a book about how can we actually museum of the future will be or not able to keep tracks of culture, and whether culture might actually disappear through the fact that most of the way that we actually keep things today are not like crates. They're CDs or softwares or stuff, and how long does that that can last? And when you see that today museums, for instance, they have problems of buying things that are organic. Most museums don't buy works that are organic. What about museum buying things and acquiring things that need to be updated every 5 years or every 3 years?
You could certainly think of digital artworks as organic in the sense that they decay and that they need constant preservation, and the framework. I mean, it's not just the file; it's the headset or whatever. It's the monitor.
Yeah. I think with there is the software and the hardware. There is the language of writing in virtual reality is universal, and it doesn't change, and it's unity, as Jacolby was mentioning, and that evolves to a certain extent, but there is certainty that this will prevail for the coming future, so that's not changing, and then to preserve files in that is pretty simple. What is evolving very quick is the headsets, and that is an issue, but at the same time, one headset is costing €700, and it's not so expensive that you couldn't replace it. Also, for institutions, it's actually a no-brainer to start collaboration with the producers of this equipment, because they are so keen to put their stuff in the museums where there will be access to the public, that actually the museum doesn't even have to invest in that. So that could be the solution. And then in terms of course, storing that I always also entertain that idea of what happens to the world if we all lose electricity and the mega computers blow up, and then I no longer have contacts in my Gmail. But I think that's
biggest nightmare.
Yeah, that's
There
just
are
another story.
Other questions following that question besides just VR artwork.
I don't think there's technical problems for museums. It's more about education. It's more like museums have just to consider that this will be part of their,
Yeah, we had a very interesting experience with a museum in Leipzig, where they took made a show with Paul McCarthy and Christian Lemmerts, the two artists that had produced virtual reality with us, and then they took their sculptures and their works on paper and put that together, and the show was called Reality, Virtual Reality. And the museum in Leipzig is this beautiful building, however staffed with this kind of post-Soviet mentality workers, and it was fascinating to see. I took so many pictures to see how this seemingly, kind of people who you would not assume that they would kind of find their friendship with technology so quickly, but there was so much enthusiasm in this 60-year-old women who were learning very quickly how to use the set, and then they were so excited, and there was no problem. So actually, I think it kicks in pretty fast, and the change is about to happen much quicker than we think, because You know, it's like when we had the first iPhone, we didn't think that would ever make sense to have a phone without buttons, but that happened. So, yeah, definitely. And another thing for institutions is that it's definitely there's always a line. There's always it attracts so many people, and another interesting thing is that it attracts people of all ages. So you will see the very old and the very young who want to experience this, which is now I know a kind of a problem for some institutions because they, you know,
They're targeting different audiences
Exactly.
and trying to figure out how to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
What sort of reactions did you get to your most recent VR piece?
For me?
You, yeah.
Me.
Only the best ones.
I'm actually surprised because in a way it's still an ongoing project. So I think what I like about my favorite reaction is that people I underestimate that would appreciate details and the thought that I put into it, and I think the nuance is picked up in a much more immediate way than it is in my actual 16:9 films or video art pieces that are made for the monitor. That kind of frustrates me sometimes, but it's very comforting to know for my future, you know, for finalizing out, you know, the body of work that, you know, it makes me feel good. Because I feel like no matter what age, no matter how much I feel like every time someone takes the headset off, they kind of like pick out and see, I don't know, how I dealt with depth of field or shadow or dealt with the texture mapping. I mean, like very dorky technical things that I find to be painterly and beautiful and worth observing. I feel like I get that kind of feedback with it. And sometimes I get the, whoa, fuck, what kind of LSD do you take kind of thing. And I'm like, nothing, I'm just, yeah, I have a lot of mental illnesses. Yeah.
Let's open it up to questions from the audience. I think there's 2 here already.
From my understanding of this is, you got the PlayStation goggles, and you came a long way from the ViewMaster, for those who remember the ViewMaster. Distribution of your artwork in the VR, will it be downloaded from somewhere like an iTunes directly into the goggles? And then I'm actually looking at how, because it has to be sold, right? You're going to be selling these pieces. What about direct competition with holograms and the images? And hologram, I invested in a hologram company back in 2009, but they kind of went under. But I know they're reinventing the hologram to make them even more realistic. Mm-hmm. We have no need for a headset or anything. Yep. So that's where we're going. So that is the question.
It's a question about distribution, right? About distribution models.
And how do we maintain, which way are we going? Are we going to have a headset? Or are we going right into
Okay, so it's also a futurological question.
Well, I mean, it depends. I say that the message, whatever the message is and what medium benefits that message the most. I still consider using a 35mm film roll, like doing some crazy daguerreotype or something, you know, like I love archaic mediums as well as new mediums. I actually hate new mediums more, and the reason why I choose to work with them is because the best artwork comes from what you stick your nose up to. I love tacky things and making them poignant, and I think the tackiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life is augmented reality and holograms, and therefore it's my next pursuit. I've been looking at a lot of old 60s modernist sculptures and Lee Bontecourt chandeliers and thinking, man, if I could just have a gestalt where I walk around it and have these like satellite celestial iPads around it generating augmented reality narratives on top of these planes and forms, that can be beautiful, and it cannot be. I just hate the fact that those technologies are like, gotcha. I'm not a gotcha guy. You know, I think that's shitty. I don't think the art world needs a gotcha moment. I hate gimmicks, but I love making a gimmick a poem. And, you know, like anything, like, I mean, I'm not gonna just go for whatever shiny or, like, I don't care. I hate the Michael Jackson hologram shit. It's cheesy. But, like I said, you know, there's everything can add to the solution. Sorry, I'm starting to stand up.
I think I would like to add to the answer that we always try to see some linear projection of one possible option of how things will go, but the more we progress, the more we see that it's actually non-linear. So I'm sure there will be room for all kinds of variations of technology, but I just recently read this article, which was very credible, where they said that in the foreseeable future, they could see that it would be the combination of augmented reality and virtual reality which take over the world, where we will finally be rescued from the screen, which is the one of the interfaces which has kind of enslaved the humanity. So virtual reality and augmented reality together are the liberators that are coming to save us from this addiction to the screen and bring us back to the world.
I want to say something, I think. Well, I feel like if we make it to 2035, post-climate change, I imagine theaters will be central. Like the stage will be a ring around, and I think that's what, I think we'll be experiencing theater and moving image in a dome. Like, I don't know, I'm using my I'm actually imagining something and trying to embed it into your guy's head, and I'm failing miserably.
You should make it in virtual reality.
I
And show
know,
us.
hook a man up with a fund so I can
That should
make
be
it
your
happen.
next project.
Yeah.
Making deals. Let's have another question. I think back there.
I'm also right here.
Hi. Hi.
Okay, so my question is actually going back to what you were stating around the gaming industry with virtual reality. So as we know, the statistics do show that gaming has been the prominent medium used in the virtual reality space. And gaming as a demographic use is predominantly filled by white males, correct? So when I'm thinking about how virtual reality in the art space is going to expand, I'd like to hear about how we're also going to disrupt the positionality of underrepresented demographics within the art spaces using this medium.
Well, I mean, those people have to make them. You have to wake up and decide that you want to make. I think that oh wait, that was. Oh, I didn't even. Sorry. Because there are lots of collectors in New York that I know. There's a all-female, women of color coding group in the Lower East Side that's doing really compelling things. I mean, I think that initiative is kind of bubbling more and more than you think. I mean, I've come across so many well-funded collectors in Soho and Lower East Side and Brooklyn of gender and race kind of orient specific kind of tutoring groups that they build apps together, and it's very collective, and it's more about fighting against that. I know Silicon Valley's, but that's because they're trying to make a profit, and when the capitalism comes into place, that's when it gets capitalism is in the art world, but if we're making an app that is, if you're making an app because you want to make $1 million, you're going to get really shitty about how you're politicizing your workforce. But I think the art world is just a different kind of instrument and a different kind of conversation around.
I think we see the same sorts of representations of underrepresented demographics in the art spaces, traditionally.
So are you talking? Yeah, I'm kind of repeating because you don't have a mic. So you're talking about representation in the artworks, but also representation in art spaces, people making, so authorship as well as representation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny being brown and optimistic. I'm look at me, they're going to call me a coon. Who says that? Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think if you're I'm very optimistic. I think that actually I see more people of color, and I feel like I have more community of people like DJs, sound artists, virtual reality people, I feel like that community is mostly like, yeah, brown people. And I think that's because our escapisms during those hard times were Tumblr, were AltaVista, GeoCities, Netscape Navigator. We hid inside of forums to find people like us. And so our second nature is to use those machines to express ourselves. So that's why I'm optimistic. I mean, usually when you defend, in this era, when you defend inclusion, because everybody wants to latch onto the adversary more because it feels better and it's more distracting, but I think that things are looking better. And I've been through some shitty times as participating as an artist in the art world in art school. So I'm optimistic.
I think as a someone from the producing side, we definitely don't have that issue at all. I feel, I mean, of course, we don't have yet a black artist or an Indian artist, but that's definitely our agenda, and we're seeking to find them. We have a female Chinese artist, we have a Ukrainian artist. We're definitely open to whoever. It's for us, it's more about the concept and the idea of the work, and if it can fit within the certain budget. That's all. Yeah.
Hello. I have a question about democratization of art. I enjoyed the comment on democratizing the experience, but then what I'm hearing from you is just distributing to institutions like museums, and you mentioned like the theater of the future. But what is your vision when we know the prices of headsets are coming down? Like you can get good headset for $300, and the companies are making more of those. Like, how do you see the near future? Do you have plans, or what is your vision in distributing to millions of people the art rather than to specific institutions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I've been trying to squeeze in saying that myself, so thank you for asking. That is actually the most exciting part of how we think that virtual reality art is going to be the revolutionary drive, which will be the force democratizing the art and accessibility for audience to view art. So we strongly believe that there is coming soon a time where people will be able to do something of a sort of pay-per-view of the artwork at their homes. It's not so long from now. There have been initiatives trying to set up platforms as such, but it feels early today because simply people are not familiar enough with the technology for their homes. But it's coming very soon, and I think that will be the point. We communicate with a lot of virtual reality agents, let's say, in the art world, and everybody is agreeing that maybe we will no longer need museums.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't need a particular location.
I think as soon as the headset becomes like a paper plate where you can throw it away, which is, because actually with Oculus Go, it's just a USB inside of this thing, and that's technically, like, that's the first step to, like, I was picturing 10 years. I think that galleries need to be able to, spend $5,000 on, maybe like 20,000 headsets that are like disposable. So when the viewer comes, I think that's the thing that's making it such a straining exhibition thing. But I also had this, I guess I'm giving away my thunder when I'm saying I've been debating on, like, what if I just committed my time to making an app that maybe only had a 45-day span of time, and it's an empty gallery wherever in the world, and that's my exhibition.
There are already projects like this. There's a virtual reality art museum created by the collection of Levy family.
I was in they do a virtual reality art exhibition.
This is it's a museum of Chinese art, right? It's a collection, the virtual reality collection of virtual Chinese art in a virtual museum based in Paris.
Yeah, based in Paris.
From what I understand.
You can see it anywhere. So it's definitely coming, and that's another, I guess, window where we don't really know how the humanity will take this further and how the art world will take it further, but I think we'll definitely exploit it to the maximum.
Yeah.
But what do you think, Francois, about the role of the institution and the museum there?
Well, it's very complicated because I think if we have to invent institutions specifically for that kind of technology, for me, it's completely irrelevant. I think institutions in general, but not only institutions, galleries. Like, I don't know, I haven't seen the whole fair, but I haven't seen many VR pieces here today. So, there's a whole. Your question is very important, and I don't have any answer. But I think there's a lot of questions to ask around the subject. The economical question about it, like whether galleries would make money out of it. That's a question. Would they be able to sell works like that for what kind of use? But also the production side is very interesting and important. You guys are doing a great and terrific job, which is fantastic. But like a young artist who wants to do a virtual reality piece today and doesn't have, himself the technology to make it, then, in terms of costs, in terms of production, I don't know the details of it, and I guess it's becoming more and more democratized.
Well,
but
it's not that expensive.
But this is
expensive.
exactly where we also felt our need in this niche, where we try our best to enable young artists, any artists who come to us with the idea. We really try to do our best. We try to apply for funds. We invest ourselves. We try to get people who will sponsor a particular artwork, where we try to finance these projects, and it's not as difficult today.
No, it's not what I'm saying. Of course, it's not difficult, but it's a different kind of economy. Like, for instance, with video, what we start seeing now is that there are producers that are producing video art, and they have a specific agreement with artists, which differs from the agreements that those same artists have with their own gallery, in terms of how they finance, how they sell the work, what happens if the work is sold. And then, I'm also questioning this: what will happen in the future when you will have VR producers for the arts? Would they be actually selling the works themselves or not? Would it be what? It's a question. I don't know. What kind of economy?
Yeah, it's a good question. Where the gatekeepers
we
are, I guess.
We have an answer according to our model, and that is that we produce the artworks. Right now, at this point, we help to promote them as much as we can. We try to exhibit them, or put them in museums, put them in the art fairs, or biennales, or any kind of place where they will be accessible to public. But we really encourage the galleries to step in and start selling them and be the ones who are the selling agents. And now we can see from our dialogue with the galleries that it's now coming to the turning point where they're accepting the challenge and they're willing to try and step in more, trying to sell it.
One more question, I think.
Hi, thank you. I kind of wanted to circle back to what you were saying about if we make it past 2035. I'm a little worried. I'm really excited about VR as a medium, especially because of the medical implications, like rewiring our brains. That's amazing. But do you guys see any environmental precautions being taken by any of the companies creating headsets? Is there some sort of recycling program? I know that with the cheapening of the headsets also comes greater production, and I'm just really worried about our oceans getting filled up with,
Our oceans are getting filled up with everything you like. You can't. That's a snake eating its own tail. I don't even know how to comment on that.
For ourselves, I could say that we're really focusing on this creative sphere where we are working with the artists and trying to encourage them and engage them and enable them to produce the pieces they want. You could ask the same question about any installation at the fair, or come to Art Basel Unlimited and then try to see what happens with all the walls afterwards. Not specifically Art Basel Unlimited, but it's a question that humanity is facing in general. I don't think it's we can give the same answer about everything. No, I don't think humanity is at this point thinking about efficient recycling, and it's sad.
At the
But-
very least, there are no shipping costs for a VR artwork if you have a headset. So there's,
I think we can approach this.
there's
in-
the fuel that isn't being burned. Unfortunately, we have to end, but thank you so much. It's been a joy, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. That's fun.